Welcome to Disaffected Live on Thursday, May 28th, 2026. I am your host, Josh Slocum, and as always, when I'm running solo, I have to check and make sure that everything is hitting the correct platforms. Bear with me, folks. I'm running tech and being the host at the same time, which I'm not very good at. Let's make sure things are going live. Yes, I'd like to view this on Rumble and make sure that Rumble is showing me and showing the audience what it should. There we go. Okay, very good. Now I'm going to stop paying attention to any other screen except the one I'm using to talk to you all on. This has been a hell of a week. Thank you for joining me. Everything has been screwed up. You guys know him. You knew of him. My dear darling big bear white cat Shredder died this past Saturday. So I didn't do the show. I didn't do the Sunday show that you're used to last week. And Kevin, the other half of Disaffected, and our friend Scott recorded some stuff, but it was very last minute because of, my cat's death coming up and everything was thrown into haywire. So what we're going to have for you, I know it's late and thank you for your patience, but later today, we're going to publish that show hosted by Scott sitting in for me. Scott also had a cluster B mother, Korean flavor, which makes it extra spicy. And he's got great stories. So later in the day today, Thursday, check back on whatever platform you happen to be on, Twitter, YouTube, or Rumble, and we will have what should have been last Sunday's show out for you. And this coming Sunday, I will be back in the saddle doing the show as usual. And thank you to everybody who sent me really kind notes and messages about the death of my cat. I know it sounds kind of maudlin, and I'm sorry, but I dearly loved this cat. I love my animals very much. I feel a great and consistent sense of responsibility for them. And when they die, the grief is real. So thank you all for your kindness. Today, we are going to be talking about autism, Asperger's, and what appears to be the taking over of the autism world with cluster B personality disorders and people who are enabling cluster B personality disorders. I've got a panel for you here today of interested people who I'll be introducing to you who are concerned about this problem too. And one way to frame this problem is to think about friends you've had. Think about news stories you've read. Think about stories that have been told to you about somebody who really went off the deep end, abusive, lost touch with reality. Think of your unstable friend. Think about all the times you've been told, oh, she's bipolar. Listen carefully. We're going to disambiguate terminology. She's bipolar. You've heard that many times. Bipolar is the new and confusing term for what we used to call manic depression. Manic depression is a mood disorder. It is not a personality disorder. This is literally a category error. Almost all claimed diagnoses of bipolar, in my experience, are actually borderline personality disorder or narcissistic personality disorder, something in the cluster B personality disorder range. I call bipolar the sympathy misdiagnosis because it's actually not difficult to tell the difference between manic depression and borderline personality disorder. It's not difficult at all. They both have mood swings, but two things having mood swings doesn't mean that they're the same thing. The easy way to distinguish them, insert your own not alls. I understand there are always edge cases. That's for you to decide. The easy way to distinguish them is that the mood swings in manic depression / bipolar, manic depression, bipolar. I'm repeating it because I am trying to wear a groove in your mind. There's a reason for my repetition. I'm sorry if it annoys, but there's a pedagogical reason and I'm right to do it. Bipolar manic depression, the mood swings tend to take place over weeks to months. So a manic depressive will slide into a profoundly, and they spend most of their time in the depressive state. It's not a 50-50. It's not like they're really happy 50% of the time and really horribly suicidal 50% of the time. It's more like 80 to 90% of the time they're either depressed or in an anhedonic state, a little bit above depression, but still low, melancholy, you might think of it. And then gradually over weeks, they'll ramp up into a manic state where they can lose touch with reality and act very grandiose in ways that do appear narcissistic. But weeks and months, borderline is not weeks and months to change state. It's literally minutes and hours. If the curve looks like this for bipolar manic depression, for borderline, it looks like this within one day. Okay? It's super easy to tell them apart on that basis alone. But what's happening now, I believe, is that the sympathy misdiagnosis of calling people bipolar who are borderline, that's what autism is doing now. We are seeing autism claimed for a whole range of behaviors and personality types that have nothing to do with autism or what we call neurodivergence, nothing to do with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. We're looking at cluster B. We're looking at outbursts, abusive temperaments that come from cluster B personality disorders. As a reminder, there's 4 ways to dice up cluster B. These don't matter so much. Cluster B is what really matters, but the flavors are borderline personality disorder, narcissistic personality disorder, histrionic personality disorder, and antisocial personality disorder. Antisocial PD is what you know colloquially as sociopathy or psychopathy. And there's slippage between those 2 words too. There's no consensus on the definition of those colloquial terms. So we're going to do some disambiguation with our guests too. Let me bring them on. Alex from New Zealand, Elizabeth from the UK, and we have Bear from the United States. Welcome, everybody.
Hello.
Can you guys all hear me? Can you say, yes, I can hear you, Josh?
I can hear you, Josh.
I can hear you.
Okay. Let's do a little tech sorting out first. If you have, I want all of you guests, please, to look only at the StreamYard tab. Do not close all tabs that may be showing you Rumble or YouTube. It's like when you call into the radio, they tell you to turn off the radio and listen only to the phone. Don't have a tab open with YouTube or Rumble. You'll be off in timing and you'll get confused. So just stay with me here on StreamYard. All right, so we got Alex, got Elizabeth. Bear, are you with us? Bear, can you hear us? I don't think Bear can hear us. Elizabeth, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Alex, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, I don't think Bear can hear us. He's not responding.
Well, I just heard his voice.
Can you say, yes,
Hold on.
I can hear you?
I can hear you, Josh.
Okay. Okay.
I cannot hear you.
If you
His-
have, okay. I want all of you guests, please, to look. Let's see. Audience, thanks for bearing with us. I'm sorry. This happens from time to time.
Maybe showing you Rumble or YouTube.
Bear, you may wish to.
When you call into the radio,
you know what?
they tell you to turn off the radio.
I'm going to take Bear down because he can't hear us and he can't hear the instructions. But he, if either of you are in contact with him, if he happens to text you or something, if you could let him know that he needs to pay attention to the StreamYard and to close those. He's got other windows open. I can hear that. He's got a YouTube window open. I'm not able to contact him, so I hope he'll be able to rejoin us. So let's start out here. Elizabeth is from the UK, and she's been diagnosed with Asperger's syndrome. And I haven't had a chance to read through all of her material yet, but she has been working on, and I think has developed a way to help profile and figure out who is autistic and who's not. So Elizabeth, welcome. Why don't you introduce yourself more accurately than I can?
Right. Well, I'm Elizabeth, and I got into the field of autism because I was working as a university lecturer and it all fell over. When the financial world went crunch, for some reason, bureaucracy exploded. And me and bureaucracy don't mix. So me in academia had to part company. That's not something I regret. But by then I had discovered that there were no services that provided unbiased sort of service for helping autistic people in the workplace. So we started something up. As a result of that, I worked with some autistic people. I read lots of books, and I created this framework of autism, which I now use to describe the autism of an individual in terms of things like processing issues, sensory issues, how they think, how their emotions are working, executive functioning, interest and focus, all that kind of thing, all of which interact with each other. And then once you've figured out how they tick, how their autism is working, then it's much easier to figure out how to help them. So that's where I am in the autism world.
Okay.
But looking on LinkedIn mostly, me and social media don't really mix. But looking on LinkedIn, you get all these posts by people who claim that they're autistic, or they're autistic and ADHD, or they're just ADHD. And
Okay.
they don't describe any of those things I've just been talking about. They don't talk about processing issues. They don't talk about sensory issues. Don't talk about any of that. Sometimes it's couched in autistic kind of sounding language, but it's not autism. And then we've got the neurodiversity movement, which they just don't seem to know what autism is, nor ADHD, nor anything else.
Yeah, it seems like it's become sort of a catch-all dumping ground at this point. We're going to come back to that because after I introduce all of you, we're going to do some definitions on autism. Let's bring in Bear. Bear, are you here with us from the US?
Yes, I am.
Excellent. Thanks. This happens all the time. Don't worry about it. This is modern digital connectivity. Everybody knows I always have some tech problems, but it's not just me. It's these goddamn systems that all have different protocols and they want different bespoke little actions to work with each other. I know that you, well, I'm going to say what I think I know because we're all rather new to each other. So you correct me. But I believe that you too have been diagnosed with autism later in life. Tell us who you are and a little bit about your story.
My name is Bear. I was a psychotherapist for about 25 years. I have moved out of the field. I'm moving into technology, which has always been a side gig for me. I was different as a child, but when I was growing up in the 70s in a small town in Western North Carolina up in the mountains, this was before autism was even a diagnosis within the DSM. In a town that literally had no psychologists. The way that I was understood was simply retarded. I mean, it's a non-politically correct word to use, but that was my experience, and that was what everyone else experienced around me. Now, the religious also said that I was touched, but all of the hallmarks, all of the traits, nonverbal,
Yeah. Tell us what were you like as a boy, and give us an age range and tell us what you were like.
Sure.
What was your behavior or your lack of behavior?
Sure. Precocious in some ways and stunted in others. Lots of sensory issues. I can give you a good example. I begged my father to take me to the racetrack, stock car races. I desperately wanted to see Bobby Allison. He takes me to the track and everything's fine. And then the cars rev up their engines. Yeah. And the sound was so loud to me, was so overwhelming that my father described that I literally hid underneath the bleachers and I was screaming, shaking, reacting violently to the noise. He picks me up, hauls me out of the stadium. And then, of course, I'm like, I want to go back. I want to go back. And he tries it again, and it just doesn't work. There was no way for me to take it. So, I'm crying.
What age were you when that happened?
We were at
Approximately.
the old house. I would guess around 5, somewhere around
Okay.
5 years old. Um,
Did you
I could,
speak at 5 years old? Did you
I
speak or were
could,
you nonverbal?
I was nonverbal. I could make sounds. I would gesture. My younger sister, who was about 2 years younger than me, could communicate of sorts with me. She understood what my gestures, what my sounds meant. I think my father began to. They
Yeah.
always baffled my mother. Um, but the sensory issues were a big thing, particularly sound, um, but all of them. Um, my father described, I have other neurological deficits and disabilities. I have something called aphantasia, and I have SDAM. And aphantasia is the lack of an internal visual eye. I do not have a mind's eye. I do not see
Okay.
things visually. That has impacted my autobiographical memory. So when I tell you these things, most of our autobiographical memory is about 75% of it is visual. And that allows an immersion and a feeling of what occurred when we remember events. For me, it's more like a data point in a Wikipedia article. So the
Okay.
things that I can tell you are like that. So if it sounds strange, that's why.
That's why.
Because
Okay. Thanks.
that's how
Yeah.
my brain and my mind process memory and these experiences. Um, let's see other things. I had the obsessive compulsive behaviors, the nighttime bed routines that had to be done. I had to line up every single one of my stuffed animals in the right way in the bed so that I felt safe. I had to put all of my shoes in a particular order. I had to set up my toys. I had to do all of these things. I was fastidious, my father used to describe me as being.
Yeah.
Um, when I say that I was precocious in other ways, that it was obvious that I understood language, probably well beyond my chronological age. I was capable of reading. I could write. I could communicate like that, but I just didn't speak. And, when I worked with, I had two different people diagnose me when I was diagnosed. The first was a specialist in autism, and then she said, I don't work with other neurodevelopmental disorders. I believe you have ADHD, possibly others. Once you get into a system and start to explore this further, you need to do that. And so I
And
then
how
learned.
how old were you when you got that first diagnosis?
I was in my early 50s.
Okay. Thank you.
Um, and so then I, about 6 months later, worked with a neuropsychologist whose specialty was much broader with neurodevelopmental. He worked with ADHD. He was the one who diagnosed aphantasia, the SDAM. He diagnosed a separate sensory processing disorder that was above what was considered to be normal for the autistic. All autistics have sensory issues, but mine was so broad and so deep and so intense. He said it warranted a separate diagnosis.
Got it.
And so those sensory things were there. My relational capacity at that age, the only way to describe it was odd. I didn't know. Once I was speaking, I would say things that were pretty much constantly inappropriate, um, unintelligible, of course, but out of sorts, out of place. The idea that things like manners and communications around that kind of stuff were very difficult for me. Um,
Okay.
Again, my younger sister, who would often jokingly say that I'm her baby big brother, because in a lot of ways, I needed that kind of support even then. This kind of goes off into the diagnostic criteria, but we talk about in the field about with the diagnosis of autism that there are two distinct tracks. There's the intrapersonal, the self, and then there's the interpersonal relation to others. And you all are probably familiar with the levels of support. And all
Yeah.
autistics need support, but it's determined on a 1, 2, or a 3. And
we're gonna
high,
go. We're gonna. I'm
Okay.
sorry to step on you, but we're gonna come back to that. I want to introduce Alex.
Okay.
And I should have said also, folks. As with all my guests, I'm going to step on you from time to time.
Not a
I'm
problem.
I'm going to redirect, and you expect me to stop you at times and ask you to define things because we're presenting to an audience who is not as familiar with these terms, and I may not be. Don't take it as rudeness. It's not. It's just me trying to keep the flow of the conversation coherent for everybody.
Yeah,
Alex,
no problem.
why don't you introduce yourself? Who are you, and what brings you to be interested in this topic?
Okay, my name is Alex, and I was diagnosed with autism around 10 and with Asperger's as well. My autism was caught when I was at least 3 years old. When I was 3, I was living in Hong Kong with my parents until 1994 when we immigrated to New Zealand. And in 1995, my teachers told my parents that I potentially could have autism, and they recommended my parents see me to get psychologically assessed. And by 1998, I was diagnosed with autism and Asperger's disorder. And now, when I was at school, I was severely bullied because many of the students when I was attending school did not like autistic people at all. So I had a tendency to get into trouble as well with the school staff. But by 2003, things just softened down, and in 2009, I basically left school, and ever since it's been ever hard to look for a job until 2016 when I was employed in the IT industry for 4 years until the COVID pandemic hit. And during that time, I did on and off voluntary work, such as I helped groups who are involved with family violence harm reduction and also autism advocacy. And I want to tell your listeners now, if anyone says that people who have sociopathy or narcissistic tendencies will change, I advise them to run and don't listen to that person.
I agree with you. Yes. Yes, absolutely. So this is a good time to do our definitions and our disambiguation. All of you came together and then brought me into the conversation because you are all concerned about what appears to be the incursion of people with actual cluster B personality disorders, but also into they're claiming that they're autistic now, right? And you've all seen instances of the professional world that is supposed to be serving the needs of autistic people and their families seems to be taking this on board. And some of it may be inexcusable diagnostic confusion on the part of professionals. They really shouldn't be confused about this stuff, but yet they seem to be. I suspect some of it is also that a number of the advocates, I'm not naming any names, but I believe, and I believe this is true of the mental health field broadly, but I think it is especially true of the portion of the mental health field that is now dealing with what it calls autism, Asperger's, etc. I believe that many of the practitioners themselves are personality disordered. They're borderlines or narcissists. Some of them are sociopaths, and that this is narcissistic supply for them. This is ego gratification, and they are quite deliberately trying to camouflage. Because cluster B personality disorders, and this is going to tweak some noses, and I'm not sorry about it, actually. There are some exceptions here, but I'll leave everybody, as always, you supply your own, not all, so I'm not going to do it for you. With some exceptions, approximately, having a cluster B personality disorder, narcissism, sociopathy is shorthand or technical terminology for being a bad person. I don't ask any of you to agree with that, but that is what I see. These are people who have manipulative tendencies. Sometimes they're conscious, sometimes they're unconscious. They're exploitative. They drain resources from other people. They do not reciprocate the energy that they take from other people. They often lie and misdirect. They often create themselves to appear to be victims of other people when in fact they themselves are perpetrating bad behavior. And when people object to their bad behavior, they call those objections abuse, right? So as an example, I grew up with a mother who fully qualifies for borderline and narcissistic personality disorders, secondarily, probably also antisocial. And my when she would scream, rage, throw things, hit her children, lie, accuse us of things we didn't do, or tell us that we did a bad thing that she actually did herself. And when we would cry, when we'd object, I'd cry out of fear because I was afraid of my mother hitting me. She would call the objection to her abuse an act of abuse against her. Right. So this is what cluster B people often do. You know, when you react to their bad behavior, they come back and say, "You're hurting me." Right. So that's cluster B. I'm going to turn it over to you and we're going to go. I'm going to call first on Alex. No, I'm going to call first on Elizabeth, then Alex, then Bear. And I'm going to ask you all to define autism. What is autism, Elizabeth?
Well, I think for that, because of all the confusion, I want to be clear that it involves deficits, impairments, that it is not about any external thing. You are disabled yourself by your autism. It comes, well, I could list the diagnostic criteria, but actually, for me, autism is a cognitive deficit. It's cognitive. It's about sensory issues, it's about processing issues, and a whole host of other cognitive stuff. It's nothing to do with personality. Nothing makes you autistic. It's just kind of how you are.
So would you characterize it as an organic wiring issue, if you will?
I'm always wary.
By organic, I mean largely genetically determined rather than in. And I'm not doing black and white. I'm not saying 100% and 0%. I'm asking, would you characterize it as largely an inborn and genetic issue?
I find that a difficult question to answer, because if you look at the brains of newborn babies and the brains of adults, there's no comparison. The baby has an awful lot of organization within their brain to do. So something is happening, but quite what, I don't think anyone has quite got to the bottom of. Because each one of our brains develops through input from the outside world. You know, through things that we learn, through things that we're taught, and that helps our brains, they self-organize into the structure that we have as adults. And nobody, as far as I know, has a clue how that happens. So the actual mechanics of autism, I don't know. But one thing that is clear is that autistic people, if they have sensory issues as children, they have sensory issues as adults. Okay. Whether Olga Bogdashina has done, a really good study on the sensory issues of autism. And for severe autism, much of that seems to result in gestalt processing of senses in some. So you see things as a whole, and they don't get separated into their constituent parts.
Okay.
And that causes all kinds of issues. It can cause a problem with vision, where an autistic person can be really upset at a very tiny change in a room, because to them it's completely different, because they see the thing as a whole.
So you're saying they respond like a cat does to a changed room. I'm a cat guy. I'm being glib, but in an affectionate way. You change one thing in a room and a cat will notice immediately.
So yeah.
Let's Alex, how would you define autism?
Okay, autism is like it has deficits such as, for example, when it comes to relationships, if you know what I'm saying. In my area, some of the autistic people I know, some of them in their mid-30s and 40s, they're still single. So that is a good example of a deficit, if you know what I'm saying. And autism can include those on the severe and profound severe and profound group. These people require 24/7 care, if you know what I'm saying.
Yeah.
And usually it can be draining for the appearance as well. I've been to group meetings where helped by the local autism advocacy groups, trying to help these parents because they're either they're getting old or they're moving into retirement home or aged care soon, and they don't know how their children or adult on the severe or profound autism are going to manage when they move into the retirement or aged care home, if you know what I'm saying.
Okay.
And just I want to put something that's very important. In neurodiversity, they portray severe and profound autism as though it doesn't exist. And whenever the parents
Yes.
speak up, they will belittle and mock them. The reason why I want to, the
Go
reason
ahead.
why I'm here saying this now is because I've seen instances on social media where these people who call themselves neurodiversity movement supporters just belittle and mock the parents for speaking up.
Yeah, I've seen it too, and this is one of the problems that I have with. I don't know how you all feel, but let me stop indulging in that. Not feel. I don't know what you all think. I'm on a crusade to get rid of this modernism. I feel like people feel like too many things, and they're not thinking about basically anything. So I want to bring us back to thinking, not feeling, and that starts with me. So I'm really unimpressed with what appears to me to be a garbage pail spectrum. I'm sick of hearing about spectrums because the spectrums are so broad now that anybody can be called autistic or on the autistic spectrum. That's what it appears like to me as an outside observer. I'm going to toss this to you, Bear. How would you characterize autism?
I'm going to be a bit more clinical and neurologically based
Please.
because that's my background. There is actually research. It is not done. It is not complete. We don't have the full picture, but we do know that the brains of autistics are fundamentally different than the brains of allistics, of non-autistics. What Elizabeth started to point out to was this idea that a small child's brain is still forming. And that's a key component. We talk about something in neuroscience called cognitive pruning, synaptic pruning.
Okay.
During the last stages of gestation into birth, the brain has way too many neurons and they have to be pruned. And this process of pruning is occurring while the various lobes of the brain are also connecting to each other. In a healthy, non-autistic brain, that process finishes roughly in stages. 3 to 6 is a stage, prepubescent, postpubescent is a stage, and then as we now know today, the brain solidifies, so to speak, around the mid-20s. That's when we would say that someone is a mature adult. Their brain has stopped forming. Doesn't mean that neuroplasticity doesn't continue in varying degrees for the rest of life, but that's
Right.
kind of the demarcation. The autistic brain does not complete the process of synaptic pruning. And it is different for different autistics because there are multiple lobes, and this is going to be expressed in different ways. I had functional MRI. I was involved with a study at the local university. They mapped my brain. Where do I have this synaptic pruning that did not complete? For me, it's the parietal lobe. The
They
main
were
thing
actually
that
able to see. This can be
Yes.
visualized on
Yes.
fMRI.
Yes, it is. It's in its infancy. It's beginning research. I mean, this is a research university, and so I was a part of a research study. But and then that mapped to what I have. Parietal lobe is responsible for our sensory processing. It's the main part of the brain for sensory. So I have the autistic sensory issues, but because of where that synaptic pruning did not complete, I have that separate sensory processing issue. And as you describe it, it is. I can pick up changes in the sensory environment that almost seem, quote unquote, to those around me like it's supernatural. How did you sense that? How did you hear that? How do you see that minor difference and stuff? And so I do view autism as a neurological developmental disorder. It is a different brain. The structures are different, the way the lobes are connected. The reason why we are called deliberative processors versus intuitive processors, you may have heard of that distinction. The non autistic is intuitive processing. Things move around very quickly between the lobes. There's a 50-50. They're able to think in terms of connotations, double messages, all these different things. And it's an organic, natural development through the age, the lifespan. The autistic is not intuitive first. We don't have the same connections to our different lobes. They are incomplete. We don't have it to the frontal cortex, which is the main, hub for executive management. And therefore, what happens to us is that we are deliberative. We don't intuit. We're denotative. We're not connotative. That is a big part of our communication and social issues. We can't pick up on your double messages. We can sense them. We can be aware that, wait, you said this, but your body's saying that. You communicated this, but your voice is saying that. But we can't decode it. We haven't learned how to decode it.
That's a very good that's really useful. I haven't heard it expressed that clearly, and that it actually clarifies for me, and I bet it does for a lot of the audience as well. I can grasp immediately the difference between intuitive and deliberative.
Yeah. Now, it's not that the allistic doesn't do deliberative, but it always starts primarily with intuitive and then follows up with deliberative. But with the autistic, there is deliberative in certain specific areas, and those often become the quote unquote special interests. And if it's an extreme, then it can even be called a savantism. I have savantism. I'm an auditory savant. I can sight read. I can tell you chords. I can hear them. I can identify them.
If I play you a note in the upper register of the piano keyboard, can you name that note as A, B, C, D, E, F, G?
I usually can. I'm very nervous in public speaking like this.
I'm not going to do it to you right now, but I'm just curious because that's a phenomenon that we call perfect pitch, right? You have a direct connection to, like, for example, I have middle C burned into my head. That's my starting point note. I have a great musical ear. Yes. Isn't that A? Isn't it A that's 440? Or am I mixing?
440. No. Yeah.
But I personally, middle C is my ground note. I have great relative pitch. I can get anywhere. I can transpose a key. I can sing middle C. I can hear and identify, but it's the only note I can identify that way. But you've got that ability, so that's cool.
Yeah, and so those kinds of oddities occur within the autistic spectrum. Not everyone is capable of that, but there are those things. And I think a piece that is missed about autism is that because it is the brain itself, there are other actual physiological issues that we are starting to explore if the neurodiversity movement will allow it to occur. They have fought against that. There are hypermobility, hypomobility issues that autistics have. Autistics have an excessive amount of blindness or degrees of blindness that are found more in the autistic populations than would be expected compared to non-autistic populations. The speculation around the aphantasia for me and a sleep disorder that I have, it's a circadian rhythm sleep disorder, is that is a part of that, a function of that disorder of my brain. There are inflammation issues. There are food issues. A lot of the things that are called under ARFID of avoidant restrictive food intake disorder for autistics that there is probably a physiological basis that certain foods just literally don't feel right in our bodies, that we have strange allergies, we have strange inflammatory things. So for me, autism is definitely not just cognitive. I experience it in every aspect of my life. It is my sensory processing, it is my cognitive, my relational, my physiological. Have struggled with those things my entire life. I'm a gamer. I play video games, and I would, if someone asked, well, what is your life like as an autistic? Well, I'm playing on the hardest mode of a game all the time.
Got
And
it. Good way to
everything that
say it.
I'm doing. And that's why could I make it through grad school? Yes. But it had to be in a different way. I didn't traditionally do well. I went to Yale Divinity School in 2 years. I had to leave. I couldn't hack it. But I got a
Got it.
master's in psychology via an adult training program that had weekend training, different things like that.
Makes
I did
sense.
much better in private practice than I did working with others with
Right.
jobs.
I want to bring over. Thank you, Bear.
You're welcome.
Elizabeth, I think I hear a similarity, a connection between what Bear was saying, what you were saying. You said, and I'd like to ask you to expand on this because this will take us into what the problems are with mixing up cluster B with autism in the community, so to speak. You said earlier that this is not a personality. It's not about personality. Autism is not about personality. I'd like to hear more thoughts from you, Elizabeth, on what you are seeing in terms of education about autism, definitions of what autism is, advocacy for autism. Do you see a blurring, intentional or otherwise, where personality issues are being misdescribed as developmental or neurodivergent issues?
Definitely. One thing that really comes up a lot is this high masking narrative.
Hi, what narrative?
High masking.
Mask. Oh, yes, please.
So basically what they mean by that is that somehow or other, from a very young age, they manage to mask in such a way that nobody noticed their autism. Now, the key here is that with somebody who is truly autistic, that is absolutely impossible.
Okay, I'm going to tell you what I think a layman would say, because this is what I think, and tell me if I'm right or wrong. But it seems to me that by definition, the young autistic cannot mask.
Yes.
Am I right about that?
Yes. In fact,
Okay.
no truly autistic person is able to mask to pass.
Meaning to hide your deficits in such a way that you appear to be wholly normal to other people. Yeah. It would seem to me that that ability, the inability to do that is one of the defining characteristics of autism.
Yes.
Okay. All right. I'm not crazy.
Can I jump in? Could I jump in with something real quick? I have a big problem with masking. And as someone in the field of psychology, I argue that it's actually allistics that mask. And what I mean by that is that we have personas that every human being has and learns organically. As you grew up, Josh, you learned this is appropriate behavior in my family versus appropriate behavior at work. This is appropriate behavior and interaction at home with my loved one, my wife, my spouse, my whatever, versus a friend and everything. But an autistic doesn't. I mean, I can come across a certain way online and text and even in this and everything. But anyone who's spent any significant period of time with me goes, there's something off with this dude. You know, he just, he's not normal. He's not thinking the same way as we do. He doesn't relate the same way as we do. He says things at odd times. He overshares. He undershares. He doesn't read the room. I mean, when someone tells me I'm an autistic, I have a superpower, I can read the room, I'm like, bullshit. I'm sorry. I can't read a room to save my life. I mean, there are studies on the fact that autistics are
You guys can hire me to do that. I can read a room, actually.
we're highly susceptible to propaganda and
Okay.
brainwashing because we take things at face value. I mean, now I'm an older autistic adult, and I would say that yes, over the years I've learned to quote unquote read a room better, than what I was like, say, in my 20s. But am I able to walk into a room and feel it out and everything? No, I would argue that any man or woman who claims that is likely cluster B,
Okay.
because that actually is something about the cluster B, that they are hypersensitive to changes in emotional relational states. And they have to be
Yeah.
because they're terrified of either not fitting in, not belonging, or being abandoned. And so
Right.
it is a part of that cluster. So with the masking, no, I don't mask as an autistic. If you asked anybody who's known me, let's say I have a close friend in Tucson. He's known me 35 years. And when I told him, dude, I have to let you know, I'm autistic. And he's like, no shit, buddy. He's like, I knew you were weird from the moment I met you in your 20s, that you were different, how you
Yeah.
related, when my wife would set you up on dates, all of these different things. He was like, I didn't have the vocabulary. I didn't know what it is. His daughter is autistic, so he now does. He's like, but that doesn't surprise me. He's like, you couldn't really hide things. Now we can suppress to a degree. I think that we become masters and mistresses of the white lie. I mean, it's hard to tell someone, wow, I don't know how to explain this. I didn't know how to because I didn't have the language. I'm really overwhelmed. I'm peopled out. I've had too much activity today. I'm sensory overload. You guys go on to the bar after martial arts class without me. I've got to study, and if I do that enough, then it impacts my relationship. So I learn to white lie, to say, oh,
Right.
I've got to study. Sorry, guys.
Yeah.
I've got to do
Makes
this.
sense. I want to bring it back to Elizabeth
Yes.
on this. Tell us more, please, Elizabeth, about what you're seeing in terms of the cluster B or personality or trauma-related issues, sort of, if you will, contaminating the world of autism and how it's understood.
Well, what's happening is they are taking autistic language and changing it. So if you take the masking one, autistic people do talk about masking, but they don't mean what everyone else means by masking. What they mean is somehow managing to put up, if we take an open plan office, somebody will mask their autism within an open plan office by suppressing the sensory reaction to all the noise, the visual stimulation, people moving around, the lighting, all that kind of thing. People with their favorite perfume on or favorite aftershave. All that can cause sensory overstimulation. Many autistic people kind of learn to suppress that for a while, and that is usually what they mean by masking.
And what do you think when you hear the people who are talking about masking in a way that does not make sense to you in terms of autism? What are they talking about? What kinds of things are they describing when they use the word masking?
Talking about hiding their personality.
Do you have a good go-to? Give me your best go-to example.
So they're talking about how they come across to people. Now, autistic people come across, most of them anyway, come across to the people, anybody, whoever it is, wherever it is, in the same way.
Okay.
I, for instance, have no concept that I need to talk differently to my boss than I do to the cleaner. The cleaner doesn't mind that, but the boss has a problem.
Okay.
But I
Yeah, it makes sense.
add to. Oh,
Now,
can
I've
I
got
add
in
to,
trouble for this before now.
Can I jump in and also
Yeah.
give some examples of the so-called masking? And okay, I want to let your listeners know when it comes to masking, don't believe it. I've seen people who, for example, perpetrators who carry out family violence, who actually after getting married, they just so-called drop the mask and they do nefarious things to their wives or children. And then when they go out to the public, they will actually either portray themselves to the public that they don't abuse their wives or children. That is what masking looks like. Masking has nefarious aims and goals.
Well, even think of the word mask. Hiding.
Yeah. There's a
Right, well-
manipulativeness to masking.
Yeah, and so it seems to me there are levels of, I don't know if we're talking about different levels of the same thing or if we're talking about different things in a different category. But for example, the normal range I guess I'll use the term allistic, and I understand that correctly to mean a non-autistic person?
Yeah, I prefer
Okay.
to say that than neurotypical, because neurotypical is part of the neurodiversity
Okay.
movement. And I really try to avoid that kind of speak.
Understood. Okay, so let's talk about the non-autistic person, the allistic person. With a normal, the normal range person in personality as well. So not a disordered personality, just an everyday average person, is going to modify his or her approach in different situations. You're going to speak differently to your boss than you will to your employee. I'm not saying that you'll be horrible to your employee, but suck up to your boss. I just mean, and there's a different tone that you use with family members in the home versus people that you're talking to in the line at the grocery store. I consider this to be all very normal things. I wouldn't give it a name like masking or anything like that. I would just call it socially appropriate adaptation.
Yes.
Then there's another
boundaries
level.
and socially
Boundaries,
appropriateness.
and there's another, if you will, and I'm not committed to this, I'm sort of first drafting it out of my mouth, but there is another level where people will, so for, well, and I know myself best, so I'll use myself as an example. I can do all those normal things, but I also have some traits that come from trauma. You can call them CPTSD. I have some histrionic traits. I have some borderline traits. I think at one point in my teens and 20s, I probably did qualify for a borderline diagnosis. I don't think I do now, but I think I have some understanding of that emotional instability and those fears. And so I have some reactions. I'm very easily stressed out. I'm very easily overwhelmed. And I have to make a conscious effort in certain contexts to suppress the way I would like to ejaculate frustration out of my mouth or something. And I'm not always successful at it. But that might be a level of masking, if you will. But then I think there's a higher level of purely manipulative lying that you see in really fully personality disordered people who will portray themselves to be often exactly the opposite of what they really are. Like Alex, you said a minute ago, the guy who beats the hell out of his wife, or you see it in family annihilators, like the Chris Watts case, which is famous in the United States. He murdered we've seen many cases like this where a guy murders his whole family. And we saw a more unusual case recently. I'm going to dig into it for the show this weekend, of a woman who killed her kids and herself to get back at her husband for cheating. But you will see these people attempt to portray themselves to the world as a caring family man or a caring mother, when in fact, behind the scenes, they're brutal, right? So I think these are all, they can't all be brought under the heading of masking.
Can I address some of that?
Sure.
I often see things through the clinical lens, but what you're describing, the first gradation, it would be normal Jungian terms persona, the appropriate social interaction of adults, boundaried and appropriate. There's trust, there's truth, there's a lack of a lie, there's a lack of manipulation and everything. What you're describing in the second, we do know from work. I spent most of my career working with trauma, working with PTSD. And PTSD can impact both the body and the mind. That is true. But it is something that can be healed. It is something that can be resolved. Whereas the autistic, you're not going to heal me. You're not going to fix me.
Right.
You're not going to therapize me. Therapy for an autistic is about management of life more than it is about changing behaviors or personal traits or stuff that we would normally think of in therapy. And the thing that I think, this is my soapbox, the DSM should never have been allowed to be used as it is today by lay people. That it is not and was never designed to be used in the way that it often is now. That these diagnostic criteria are guidelines for treatment. And a therapist uses them as that. The diagnosis is relevant and important, but it is only so when it helps us to resolve the problem, to fix the situation, to change what is happening. And politics and other things have gotten involved, and the DSM has become something that you now find on TikTok. Oh, look, I'm an autistic. I can check off 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Therefore, and I feel this way, I act this way, throw in a little masking, and boom, I'm autistic. Now, when you get to the personality disorder, one of my mentors described, he said that personalities in a nutshell are when the human being gets stuck at lower levels of psychosexual development and it continues into adulthood. So you can't diagnose a 14-year-old girl as a borderline because pretty much all 14-year-old girls are emotionally unstable and have this kind of
absolutely
borderline
agree. Yeah.
behavior. But if that woman is 38 and acting like a 14-year-old girl would, then we would go, yeah, that is a personality disorder.
I want
And
to.
the
I want to
same,
bring in. Sorry to jump on you, but I want to bring in. There's a really apt comment, folks. I'm doing my best. I'm not able to see the comments as much because I've got a panel guest today, but I'm trying to pay attention to what you're interested in. Rasmix1 says, "I know a few straight up narcissists that now claim autism."
Yeah.
Have you all experienced this? Do you know people like
Absolutely.
this? Have you observed
Yes.
people like this? So
Yes.
yeah, I want to, let's, thank you for that, Bear. Alex and Elizabeth, tell me your reaction to that. Are you seeing people who appear to you to be narcissistic, to have real personality issues, who are just claiming that they're autistic or neurodivergent?
Well, I have personal, rather horrible experience of that, of somebody who had a diagnosis of autism. But if you actually look through all the school reports and diagnostic material and stuff, well, it turned out to be narcissism. What I actually did was I gleaned a set of symptoms from the material I had and took it to my GP and listed the symptoms and said, "What's this?" And he immediately said, "Narcissism." So I went and looked up narcissism and it fitted. So that was my introduction to people with cluster B personalities masquerading as autism. And this case was particularly bad because this person thought, well, I've got a diagnosis of autism. Well, it was actually Asperger's syndrome, but that's just the date it was given. Same for me. And she just said, well, I've got autism, therefore I can claim whatever autistic trait I like to get what I want.
And I can be excused from responsibility for my bad behavior. Let me, another commenter, thank you, has reminded me to say this. It is important to say this. We're disambiguating and separating, but it is important to remember that somebody with autism can also have a personality disorder.
I was just about to say.
Yeah, thank you, commenter, for the reminder that these are not, that for conceptual purposes, we do need to disambiguate, but I do not wish to give the false impression that these things can't co-occur. Many mental states can and do co-occur.
Absolutely. But the expression... Oh, go ahead, Elizabeth.
And that is because I've actually looked into this and delved into the literature and things as far as I can. There isn't much. And that is that part of the personality, the cluster B personality, does occur with autism. And that's the bit about being callous, about not feeling like everybody else, about the maliciousness, or that kind of thing. But with autism, you can't have the manipulation. You can't have the convincing lying. You can't have the masking that we were talking about, because the autism doesn't allow it.
Yeah.
This makes sense to me. I have some, not nearly as much as any of you here, because to my knowledge, I'm not autistic, and I have not been in a position to give, consistent care to somebody. But my nephew was diagnosed as a child, I believe correctly. I was there to observe his behavior. He was diagnosed with Asperger's syndrome. And I realize that people aren't using that term anymore. And I think that's a mistake, because I think as a layman, I see a very big difference between the condition of my nephew and the condition of somebody like you see as an autistic savant or a nonverbal. He was never nonverbal. He was never constantly screaming utterances and unable to do anything. But as a child, he was very highly strung. He had a lot of stimming behaviors. I mean, he would do this constantly, right? A lot of self-soothing, touching behaviors. Didn't like certain foods. All classic stuff. I've known other people like this. This is my subjective, intuitive impression. I believe that I have a very well-calibrated detector for cluster B personalities. I'm not perfect, but I think I'm very good. I think I pick them up more quickly than the average person would. I get a different intuitive feeling, an entirely different intuitive feeling from somebody who's autistic and somebody who has a cluster B personality disorder. So Elizabeth, you were saying that there's some overlap, like lots of traits overlap, the callousness, for example. When I experience that callousness from a person who's autistic, it doesn't feel the same to me as it feels to me when I'm dealing with a sociopath. I don't detect malice. I don't detect I'm sorry to be so squishy and subjective and emotional, but the feeling is very different. I don't get the negative danger feeling from the autistic. I do get the negative danger feeling from the cluster B.
Yeah, you may not have come across an autistic person like that, because true autism is actually quite rare. It's a few percent of the population. This notion of this sort of overlap of traits with psychopathy, if you like, as far as I can make out from the literature I have found, is actually very rare within autism itself. Which means that
what's very rare within autism itself?
Having this psychopathy mixture with autism.
Okay.
It seems to be very rare within autism. So you've got rare on top of rare, which means the chances of you having come across somebody is almost vanishingly small.
Okay. Yeah. So I don't know what I can't know what I can't know, and I can't know what I haven't seen. So, but there is, I think there is something to be said for that difference of perception and motivation and levels of malice or conscious manipulation. I think there is a distinct difference between the autistic and the cluster B.
Well, that's what the information I have found does say. It says, the maliciousness and all that isn't part of autism.
Yeah.
But it is occasionally found in autism.
Okay.
But only,
interesting.
But you see, if you think that autism itself, true autism, is probably only a few percent at most of the population, because we've got an artificial explosion.
Yeah. I think we do. I mean, to be glib about it, fucking everybody is autistic these days, right? So if you were to just make a guess, just based on what you observe in the news and on social media and in public discourse, if I had to just make a percentage rate, prevalence rate guess just from the discourse and conversation, you would think that at least 30 to 40% of the population had autism. That's the impression I get from this. Yes,
can I
Bear,
address
please.
something? Because we actually do know from the research that even with the change to the DSM, the broadening of the spectrum, that the numbers of actual autistics have not really changed that much over the last 50 years. That it is still sitting somewhere between 2.5 and about 3.2% of the general population. And
So who
genuine
are
autistic.
so given that
Yeah.
2 to 3%, who are all of these people who are being diagnosed with autism? They're not autistic.
Mentally ill, people who are struggling with other identity issues. And this is important because personality is about identity, but there are other disorders that also have identity as a part of that.
Such as?
Gender dysphoria, eating disorders, different things like that. Are these body dysphorias are very much about identity.
Now,
And
see, Bear,
yeah,
I may be challenging you, I may not be, and I don't guarantee that I'm right. I think I might see it a little differently than you. I see, first of all, my opinion is I don't believe there's a standalone mental disorder called gender dysphoria. I think that it describes a symptom, but I don't believe it's a standalone disorder. I do not believe something called gender dysphoria happens in an otherwise completely normal range person. I believe that it is almost always a symptom of some level of underlying trauma with identity disturbance like that. I'm not going to make a totalizing claim, but frankly, when I see people who claim to be, well, trans is another example because that's related to gender dysphoria. First of all, and I'll be specific about my definitions. I don't recognize a state of being, a kind of personhood called transgender. That's not real. There are people who believe or who affect to believe or assert to the world that they think they were born in the wrong body. I understand that that is a thing that occurs, but it is not an ontologically real state. I believe it is mostly an identity disturbance. And with trans, as trans is discussed now in our era, not 40 years ago, today, I believe most of these people, I believe that their trans is a symptom of a cluster B personality disorder or severe unresolved childhood trauma. That's my stance. I'll shut up.
I'm going to push back just a little, and it's just because when I was in the field over the years that I was there, I watched these changes occur. Gender dysphoria, you're right. There are disturbances that may impact it, but we also see that with the cluster B. It's very rare to find a borderline who hasn't experienced extensive abuse, but it doesn't mean that the abuse creates the borderline. There's a genetic, non-genetic component. For whatever reason, that individual's response to the trauma then brings about the change in identity and what we call a cluster B. And that's the same thing.
Meaning another person who, if we could run the experiment, experienced the exact same trauma from the exact same people with a different genetic makeup might not have responded by developing borderline.
Exactly. And the same is true with gender dysphoria. And when I was trained, when I first was being trained, I got a diploma in sexology as well. And gender dysphoria was extremely rare as a condition.
Yes.
I mean, we're talking like 0.07% of a population. And it was almost exclusively within the homosexual population. It was rare to find. Now, there is something that is
straight, we call them transvestites,
Yeah.
the straight men who got off on dressing up in pantyhose.
Well, that's the AGP. That is a separate,
autogynephilia.
Yeah, that is a separate sexual fetish. But
Yes.
that has all been glommed together. I mean, this is something, I mean, Alex will know what I'm talking about. We had a friend on social media who's no longer there, but she wrote about this, talking about how the incredible similarities between the language being used by the transgender movement as an identity movement and cluster Bs who are neurodiverse and claim to be self-diagnosed autistics, that there was almost exactly the same kind of identity arguments, the same kind of language used, that they were special, that they were different, that they always knew that they were this way, and that just because they claimed it to be so, therefore it was so. It was an ontological thing. And I think that's important to recognize. That you asked, why do we think now that upwards of 30% of the population is autistic? Social contagion. For the same reason that we now have teenagers who 25% of them think that they are a they when they're a she, or a he when they're a she, and everything. There is a social contagion element. Now, is that all cluster B? No. There can be other reasons for it, but autism is autism with the neurodiversity movement. I think that its initial sociological goal was to look at other disability groups like Down syndrome, cerebral palsy, and recognize that this population needs some disability advocacy. But then it just went nuts. And now it doesn't even adhere to what its original stated goal was. First, ADHD was allowed to be a part of it, and then the next thing you know, if you're an introvert who is a highly sensitive person, you're neurodiverse. All of those things are now possible.
We've all got everything.
Yeah. When at one point my therapist had me go on a dating app, self-reveal here, and it was an autism dating app. Well, it started out
Well, how does that
just
work?
just autistic, not very well.
I wouldn't think so, sir.
But what ended up happening was that it became popular, and they opened it up, and you then had cluster Bs, you had bipolars, you had clinical depression, you had fetishes, and I'm serious. I mean,
there's a lot of it.
I would literally have a woman approach me and say, "Oh, I like autistic men. They do this, they do that. I'm in love with the idea of being in love with an autistic man." And that is a weird kind of objectification of my disability, that I would sit here and go, well, I mean, what if I said that about, oh, I really like women who have no legs or anything? People would look at me like that's weird.
Well, the first thing they would say is, "You abusive misogynist."
Yes. There would be these labels and stuff, and I'm probably going off tangent. You can pull me back, but that is a part of this whole discussion, that there's not a lot of autistics in the general population, not real autistics.
Okay.
So something is happening that's ballooning those numbers, and it's not neurological.
Let me put this large question to all of you. I don't know quite how to characterize it. The world of autism, meaning those who have it, those who care for them, those who advocate for their needs, the professional mental health or neurological organizations that assert to be advocating for or developing treatment protocols, the industry and population of the world of autism. Take it as a whole, however you want to define it. How much, I know this is hard to answer, how much incursion from cluster B, narcissistic adjacent interests is happening? How much of a problem is this
Massive.
in the world of autism?
Massive.
Right.
I mean,
I'm gonna hold that. You're
Yeah.
you're great, but I'm gonna go with Alex, then Elizabeth, then you.
that's fine.
Alex, how would you characterize the level of the problem?
The problem is at pandemic level. Can I
Okay.
also say these two serious traits associated with autism, the neurodiversity movement, have turned it into a joke. One of these traits is associated with severe and profound autism is a trait called catatonia.
Catatonia. Yep.
Yeah.
Explain
And
to
the
the
other-
audience exactly what that means.
Just hold on. I need to find it because I know some of the parents who have severe autistic and profound autistic children and adults. It's a complex neuropsychiatric syndrome where a person is awake but physically and mentally unresponsive or hyperactive.
Okay, so mainly when I think of catatonia, I think of a person who is awake and conscious, but who is basically staring off into the distance and unresponsive to stimuli or questions. Is that a reasonably accurate lay summary?
Yeah. And the other one is regression.
Regression?
Yeah. They've turned
what
it
does
into a
that mean?
joke. Maybe just hold on. I need to find what it's the act of returning to a previous or earlier state.
So reverting to childlike behaviors.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you would say that the cluster B problem, the incursion, the mix-up is at pandemic levels. Elizabeth, what would you say?
I would say something similar. I would say it's just swamping. It's like a tsunami that's come in, and true autism, the narratives of true autism have got lost. They've been cancelled.
Well, and this is a frustration point because my urge is always, all right, let's all figure out how to fix it, but we can't sit here and figure out how to fix it in this conversation. So I can't have what I want.
In the time available, though, I think I would love a conversation that sort of worked at it.
Of what?
I would love a conversation where we kind of discussed how to fix it, or how we might fix it, or ways.
Why don't you start that out? What do you think? Where do we start? Where do we fix this?
Well, I've been so busy writing this other document that I haven't had time to fix that. But
That's okay. You can just give your thoughts as they come.
With whom I now and again discuss that. Yeah, we need to find a way of sorting this. But this is the problem. True autism is being replaced by these cluster Bs, and the narratives of the cluster Bs, but couched in autistic language. And that has to be incredibly confusing to anyone who doesn't know really what autism is. And it's confusing to the medical professionals who've had neurodiversity narratives rammed down their throats and forced basically to adhere to them. How are they supposed to sort this out even? I have less sympathy. I have much less sympathy for medical professionals. In fact, I have a lot of it's bordering on contempt at this point, if I'm going to be frank with you. I'm getting to that point.
I find it inexcusable, professionally and ethically inexcusable, that people who have gone to fucking medical school and some who took specialized post-medical school training in psychiatric or psychological issues. This is the same group of people. These are the same doctors who've been misdiagnosing borderlines with bipolar for 40 goddamn years, right? And that's not hard to distinguish. I'm sorry, it's just not. It's dead easy. They can't even do that. And now, these are people who claim to have medical, moral, and societal prestige, and an ability to speak authoritatively about some extremities of the somatic and mental human condition, who cannot make simple category distinctions that I, as a well-educated layman, can make. So I don't have sympathy for them. I think they've really fallen down on their job. But for the lay public, I see a lot of this. Some of you may be aware of a psychiatrist named Hannah Spear. She's European. She writes on Substack. She podcasts. I've had her on my show once. She does a fantastic job, and she is hammering at this. She is hammering at the topic of, for what's called ADHD. I hate even saying it because it makes me want to slap somebody. It is so obnoxious. Autistic ADHD. So I'm gonna imitate what I see. She's had many actual in the wild examples that she's shown, but this is almost all young women. There are some exceptions, but it's almost all young women. And yes, I think almost all of them are borderlines and histrionics. You'll get some girl, often a very attractive one too, who will get on camera and say, I'm going to talk about autism. I'm ADHD and I do high masking. And okay, so like when I go out on a date with a guy, I get like super obsessed with him. Like right away, I'm like super obsessed. Like I know he's my soulmate and I just want him to know that too. And so I do all of these behaviors where I like bring him in and all this stuff. And then I realize, oh my God, I'm masking or I'm failing to mask and all this stuff. And blah, 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 blah. They'll get all manic and hyper. And what I'm looking at is a girl with borderline and histrionic traits at the very least, who is engaging in the deception. And I know sometimes it's unconscious. I know sometimes it's not consciously motivated, but it is still deception. Deception about who they are in order to reel somebody in so that they can fill that unfillable hole in their personality, you know, and they really do have unmet needs. That's real. But the way they go about doing it, but they are all making a name for themselves. They're getting clicks and they're changing public perception so that people look at girls like this. I mean, I do coaching and consulting. So I do hour-long confidential sessions with people, mostly focused on what can you do if you have a cluster B family system or one at work that you're embedded in? What are your choices? How can you deal with these people? What level of contact can you have? And constantly my clients are telling me that they're seeing this in young women in their own family. They're seeing it among the friends of their children. And people are buying it. They think, oh, that's what an autistic girl looks like. And I'm like, no, that's what a borderline looks like. And that is a signal for you to run. Maybe, God willing, she will get into therapy. Maybe she's not already 60 years old and completely calcified. Maybe she will help to resolve some of that trauma. She'll get some help and those borderline symptoms will decrease. Maybe she'll even have resolution. But until you have evidence of that, these people are dangerous. But they are... let me stop. Bear, go ahead.
Well, I want to say this, and I think it's important because I have personally known and loved those who are cluster B. I've had friends, I have had colleagues. I have some people that I respect very much who actually did go through that healing. And
Yep.
you would say that their traits, their behaviors are in remission. And I think that there can be the rare exception where someone, particularly if they were diagnosed with borderline in a teen years, that there may have been something missed. Was it autism? Was it not? That's still debatable. That still needs to be explored.
Yeah.
But that there's a difference between the kind of, I hate to use the term, but kind of a run-of-the-mill cluster B who's struggling with life and dealing with these sorts of things. And then there are the influencers. There are the TikTok celebrity cluster Bs. There are the YouTube channels. There are the Instagram girls like you just mocked quite accurately and everything. And I feel...
And the most dangerous are the medical professionals, the psychiatrists, the
Yes.
psychologists, who say they are this horrible word, AUDHD.
Yeah. And I think that I honestly think that this kind of cluster B takeover and attempt to manipulate it and morph it into autism is as dangerous for that population psychologically as it is actually for autistics too. And that might be at odds with what others might think, but I think it's because of my own experience within the field and knowing other cluster Bs and such, that having this extreme population of cluster Bs who have used the innate narcissism of social media to manipulate and change things, it's impacting everything. And it's starting to impact society too. We're starting to, I mean, there was someone who was talking about, I can't remember who it was. It might have been Christopher Pace, who talked about the narcissistic society, that
Yes.
over the last 25 years or so, that there is a change where our society is beginning to glorify, accept, and even promote cluster B traits as somehow
Yes.
laudable and
Yes.
good and positive.
Yes.
And that does a disservice to the cluster B as well as to anybody else who's in that wake, including us autistics.
You're right. I'm glad you said that. And I agree with you that of the cluster B, excuse me, of assuming accurate diagnosis, assuming we've got it right, of
Yeah.
the cluster Bs, borderline appears to me to be has the best chance of treatment. But I say that in a
Agreed.
relative sense.
Yes.
And I want to be very specific here. I'm not saying that in an absolute sense. My own
Yes.
therapist disagrees with me, and he may be right. He's educated in this and professionally, and I'm not. But I think he believes that borderline is eminently more treatable in a global sense than I believe that it is. I'm not sure which of us is right, but of the cluster Bs, the borderlines have the best chance of serious recovery, and in my view, as a layman, if the following conditions are met, and
I think
only
we're probably
if
going to
the
agree.
following conditions are met. And also, let me acknowledge, but bracket, that it does appear also to be true that with many, not all, many borderlines will age out of a lot of the severity of their traits. Some of them do. Age does seem to temper that, but I don't want to give the impression there's a discourse going around right now that I believe is false. And that discourse is that 80 to 90% of borderlines naturally leave borderline personality disorder behind with no therapy. That is not true. I don't care that you like Sam Vaknin, who is making this claim right now, audience. You should be skeptical of Sam Vaknin. He's a brilliant man. He has a lot of good ideas, but he is also an admitted and very obvious severe narcissist. So take it with a grain of salt. But the borderline, I believe these conditions need to be met for the borderline to make a successful recovery. Number one, youth is on your side. The older you get, the more calcified and concretized your personality traits are. Number two, they need a competent clinician. Competent, not just any therapist, someone who actually understands what cluster B is and what borderline actually is and what is realistic to expect from it and what's realistic in treatment, and who has the skill and the talent to work with those people. And I've met clinicians like this. They're not the majority, though. They are not the majority.
No,
Number three, and this is the subjective part that we can't know, the borderline has to have at least a spark of the ability for self-reflection. Now, borderline, all cluster B has seriously impaired insight and impaired ability to accept egotistical injury, which comes in the form of, this is your fault. It's not something somebody did to you. You have to take responsibility for it. This is extremely difficult for the cluster B. So
accountability.
Accountability. So they have to have the ability to tolerate hearing that the problem is coming from inside their emotional processing. It's not that they're being victimed by somebody else. And then they have to have the ability to keep going. So I think if those three conditions are met, the prognosis is better for the borderline. Bear, as a practitioner, would you agree or disagree?
I would absolutely agree. A person that I respect greatly is a borderline in remission who is now working with borderlines as a coach, and she works with professional therapists and everything. And I could tell you that she would 100% agree with everything that you said. She admits to that. She says, until I faced my diagnosis and until I literally got someone who was competent to deal with me, I couldn't hope to have change. And I hurt my family. I hurt my husband. I hurt my child. I hurt everyone. And it may not have been fully conscious or intentional, but I'm still responsible.
Well,
And
God bless her.
I have a great
character.
deal of respect. Yes, a great deal of respect for someone like that. That's part of why I said I want to be careful that we don't dogpile on the borderline, on, the narcissist, the dark triad, those, they are different. The histrionic, the borderline can be remission, but the narcissist,
Not so much.
I'm hard pressed in any of the, I didn't work per se with personality disorders. I was a specialist and I had patients referred to me for blocks of sessions. I did somatic interventions. And I know that I worked with those who had cluster B and different things. And narcissism, I mean, the classic example from cinema is The Sopranos. A dark triad. Tony Soprano is a classic intractable narcissist who
And
is never going to, is a struggle. The percentage chance of him ever.
I read his mother as a severe combo borderline and narcissist. I don't know how
Yes.
you.
Yeah, I would as well.
I think it's a pretty accurate psychological representation.
Yeah.
Oh, Josh,
And go ahead,
let's Alex, go ahead.
I want to just let you know, I just posted in the private chat.
I know.
Someone who went on my Twitter and claimed I was trolling when I was actually speaking with Karen Mitchell, who's actually got a book called Human Predators that's coming out next month. That's, I think, in a week's time. Yep. If any of your listeners want to read a good book, I recommend Human Predators by Karen Mitchell and Mask of Sanity by Hervey Cleckley.
Yes. Well, so let me underline it. The researcher her name is Karen Mitchell. She's coming out with a book called Human Predators. She has a model. You can find her online. She's a known quantity. I think I've tweeted with her once or twice. We don't know each other well, but I'm aware of her. She has a model she uses called the persistent predatory personality, which is it's an aspect, it's a way of looking at some of the cluster B. I think her material is worth reading. Thank you for bringing that up.
So what I did was that I was letting Karen Mitchell know that neurodiversity doesn't not only not represent autistic people, but at any opportunity when the parents speak up, they will mock and belittle the parents, because the severe and profound require 24/7 care, or when the parents start aging, they don't know what to do when they move into the rest homes or aged care facilities. And in New Zealand, where I live in, I know of some of these cases where the autistic people themselves just end up institutionalized because they've got nowhere to go.
Yeah.
And so that person who went on my Twitter, he's now saying he's got ADHD. And then I started questioning, what's ADHD? I've never heard of it.
It's not real.
It's not real. And the second thing is that if anyone who claims ADHD, I start questioning, are they manipulative or creating a narrative to hide something, if you know what I'm saying?
Or are they, yes, that's my first suspicion too. Or are they extremely misled? And this goes to a point that Bear was making about, this is not good for the borderlines either, because without accurate diagnosis and trauma and borderline specific treatment, they're not going to make progress. If they're classified as an autistic, they're not going to reach the potential for healing that might be there. And in fact, I would say that their borderline traits will be validated to them and told that they are an intrinsic part and that they must be accommodated. So, and I think that anybody, whether they're fully cluster B, whether they're subclinical, whether they're dealing with other kinds of trauma that don't result in that, but anyone who is affected psychologically by developmental trauma, and I mean real trauma, I don't mean the Gen Z, my mommy didn't give me an iPhone at 8. I mean actual childhood neglect and trauma. They're in a bad way because social media validates cluster B behaviors, praises cluster B. It's not just that we tolerate it anymore. There was a portion where we started tolerating it. We've gone from toleration to valorization. We call it being a strong, independent woman, being a ball buster, being a go-getter, being, being a fierce advocate, all of these
A
things.
boss babe.
A boss babe. That is exactly what the borderline does not need. And, I will cop to, I am emotionally reactive to, because of my experience with my mother. This is my responsibility. I'm just admitting a failure here. I'm emotionally reactive to, I am not the person, even if I were a clinician, I am probably not the person who would be helpful to a borderline, because my tolerance for it is very, very limited. It's a raw thing for me because I grew up with it, and it bedeviled me and my family until 10 years ago. So thank God there are people out there like you who can see that and can provide the help that they need for the people who are able to take it. So I want to sort of close up the discussion. We could go on for hours and hours. Maybe we should do this again too, because there is so much to talk about, and we're not even going to scratch the surface in an hour and 45 minutes. But let me throw to all of you as a final question. Maybe it's in two. No, let me not put it in two parts. Let me be simple and straightforward. Is there hope? Do you see hope? And do you see a pathway? Meaning, do you see other people who are becoming aware of this, or do you see organizations becoming aware of it? Is there hope that those who serve the genuinely autistic community will be able to recognize this cluster B incursion and start to amend it? Elizabeth, I'm going to start with you.
Well, I started speaking up because I saw signs that was kind of happening. There are people out there who agree that there's a problem. Most of them are keeping quiet because they're scared, because, well, let's face it, the backlash you get when you criticize these people is highly unpleasant. And many of them fear for their jobs. But if we could just get to a point of approaching critical mass, of more people speaking out, then I think there's quite a lot of people out there who would join it.
Well, then I hope you're speaking out. I hope the fact that you speak out and people like you, I hope they see it, and I hope it encourages them. I think it's the same motivation. It's why I do the show Disaffected. It's why I write the essays that I write. It's why I do this live stream, because I think I'm not the only person, but I think I correctly synthesized what happened to me in my own family when I recognized what cluster B was. And I think I made the correct connection between the abusive cluster B family system and the general tenor of Western society now. I often say it's as if America and the West, the Anglosphere at least, has a cluster B personality disorder. We're in an abusive relationship with ourselves and with our government and with our authority figures. So I hope that speaking out my way will cause more people to do so. And I hope that people in the autistic community will see you, Elizabeth, and people like you and pipe up with that as well. Alex, how do you see hope for this changing?
The way I would address hope is that the autism group needs to recognize this problem. And the second thing is that I want to let your listeners know, before the neurodiversity movement came, the autism group was a tightly guarded community, if you know what I'm saying, very tightly guarded. And as in what I mean by tightly guarded is that people, if people wanted to go near autistic people or work with them, they had to prove who they are, if you know what I'm saying, by their actions.
Yeah. There was appropriate gatekeeping.
Yes, appropriate gatekeeping. It needs to go back to being gatekept, because from what I'm noticing now, with virtually no gatekeeping, questionable people can go near autistic people at any time. Even the manipulative ones, if you know what I'm saying.
Yep.
Cluster B. So another thing I like, if we do a part 2, me and I think Elizabeth, we found out that the Autism Self-Advocacy Network has done harm to autistic people themselves. I think, yeah.
Okay.
What
That's
ASAN, we found that Ari Neiman and Steve Kapp are possibly not autistic given their manipulative traits, if you know what I'm saying.
Okay.
And in the next second part, we are willing to discuss how the Autism Self-Efficacy Network have gone against parents who wanted to put tracking devices on their autistic children or adult who are known to go wandering.
Wander off and get lost. Yeah.
Yep. And we can also discuss how the Autism Self-Efficacy Network manipulated the DSM-5 as well. They admitted in their own writings.
That's a whole show. That's a whole show in and of itself. You could do several shows on the DSM. Bear, to wrap it up, do you see hope, and in what direction?
I'm not as sanguine. I left the field in part because I recognized that a lot of what was happening in the field was politics and not science or medicine. It was no longer focused on healing and treating, but rather affirming and allowing. And because of that, all of these organizations, from the medical to the educational, the med schools to the psychiatric associations to the autism networks, they've all been infiltrated. And it is going to take a massive purge. I mean, I liken it to the transgender movement that has took over the Anglosphere, the Western world. And you could say that, well, there's been some change in the last couple of years. There's been more pushback. There's been
not nearly enough.
But it's not nearly enough. And I think that the autism community is not even close to being able to have that level of pushback yet. I hope to see it in my lifetime, but as an older adult now with autism, I'm not sanguine. I don't have a lot of hope. I'm
afraid I'm with you, Bear. I'm not very hopeful either.
Yeah.
And it may be a question of, there's so many things, there's so many things I've discovered that people like me, people with severe, true childhood trauma, we may think of ourselves as clever and precocious when we're young, but in reality, we're often emotionally stunted, and we're late bloomers who come to learn lessons about life much later in adulthood than other people. And I'm certainly one of them. There are things that I know now that I should have known at 20 years old. But also just the passage of time. I think I've seen enough patterns, and I've synthesized from the patterns for long enough now. I'm old enough at 51 to identify some long-term patterns. And I don't see a lot of evidence of once cluster B gets its hooks into anything, whether it's a particular kind of entertainment, a subculture, a culture at large, I have not yet seen cluster B deposed from those places. So I'm a little bit less hopeful too, but nevertheless, I won't stop what I'm doing. So I suppose I have enough hope to, and I would guess that's probably true for all of you as well. You're going to keep being interested in this because it matters. We're going to take I'm going to let my guest here go, and we're going to take a quick break, and we're going to wrap the show up after this with my friend Scott, who is standing in for me on the regular show this week. And we're going to tell you it's late, but his episode of Disaffected will be coming out. We're going to talk with Scott for a few minutes before we wrap up the stream. But I want to thank all of you. Alex, thank you for initially contacting me and proposing this as a topic. I think we are going to revisit this. We're going to have more conversations like this. Elizabeth and Bear, thank you for participating and bringing your expertise. I'm glad to meet you and talk to you for what passes for face-to-face in 2026. Thank you all for your time, and we'll talk again, okay?
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye. All right, folks, I am going to put up the be back in a minute because I need to take a quick break. And when I come back, Scott Williams, or Asian Scott, as he is dubbing himself today, will be joining us. So be right back. All right, welcome back, and welcome to Disaffected, Mr. Williams.
Hi.
Hi.
Oh, Joshua. It's so nice to see you.
Oh, you too, Scott-san.
Joshua. Hey, how's it going, man?
Hey, welcome, everybody. This is Scott Williams. Scott is a friend of mine, but he is a much longer term friend of Kevin, the other half of Disaffected. First time I think you have been on Disaffected with me. I've had you on the show before.
Yeah, for sure. We did that live virtual chat room. It was pretty cool.
Yeah. So, as you guys know, this week has been it's been a terrible week with my cat's death and Scott and Kevin scrambling at the last minute to try to put a show together. And then, of course, all the infrastructure fails and internet companies don't pipe internet in. And it's just been like one nightmare after another. Thank you all for hanging in with us. I've been taking care of stuff at home and you guys are over there in New York. So I know you put something together. We're going to have something out today starring you. Are we not, Scott?
Well, it's going to be an Asian trauma story hour. And
Me so traumatized.
I was really reluctant at first to do something because you have such a specific way of presenting. But I figured that the underlying trauma is just so similar and that carries over.
You're not supposed to be me. You're you.
Oh,
do your you
nobody
thing.
Can replace you. Nobody can replace Josh, FYI. And nobody
Thank
can
God for
replace...
small mercies.
Yeah, I know. Well, yeah. It's hard enough being me. I can't imagine. So anyway, I wanted to kind of take this the reason for me standing in is very sad, but I was also thinking, well, this might be, the silver lining of this, death cloud, because I relate to what Elizabeth was saying, where it's very difficult to want to stand forward and speak out because of the backlash, because of the abusive criticism from people who are cluster B or narcissist. I've been threatened at knife point. I have had my childhood pet killed. I have had all sorts of very fucked up and real repercussions for existing around these people. So I know personally what it's like to be raised by cluster B. We'll just call my mom that general umbrella. It was how do I put it? It's very eye-opening when you link your childhood of abuse and you see kind of the narratives going on currently. We've got, white men under attack, white man bad, women, Asian minority, listen to, all women, minorities are victims. That has not been my experience. having been raised by an Asian psychopath mother.
Right. And you're, just to specify it, it's your mom's side is Korean, your dad was a white American, right?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. And, you know, I'm Asian enough to apply for jobs, but I'm not Asian enough for Asian people to fully recognize me.
Are
And
you,
so-
wait, are you that thing they call Asian?
No, I'm that thing you call DEI hire. But no, Asian, yeah, I guess. But I mean, you know, if
You know,
I'm not
people are saying this in the comments, and I'd like your reaction to it because I think I see it too. This is just from my own experience and observation, but I think Korea, specifically Korean culture, produces a disproportionate number of cluster B mothers. There seems to be a particular flavor of Korean cluster B mom that is very distinct and very severe. That's what it looks like to me from the outside. What do you think?
Well, I will say that's probably quite true. I mean, I only have personal experience being raised by Korean, you know, a Korean woman, Korean women, but they are fucking psychopath. Holy shit. Oh my God.
Yeah, your
Like,
mother particularly. And in this show that's going to come out, are you going to talk about, do you tell some of those stories?
The whole thing is basically me just putting my, you know, now that I've, you know, survived it, she's dead now, which is why I finally feel safe to come out of my shell. I really don't like being on stage talking about my fucked up past because it's completely unrelatable to most people. Now, I do know everybody has their own version of family trauma. This is life. As I get older, I see more and more people are just fucked up and raised by fucked up people, and they keep populating, and that's just life. But when I start to share some of my stories in friends groups growing up, they just look at me like I'm a fucking alien. But, you know, my mom immigrated here legally. So it's, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let me hi, sweet baby. Mina's here, guys. Mina has been taking care of me since Shredder died. And I know it sounds like anthropomorphizing, and perhaps it is, but I know this cat well, and I know she knows he's gone too, because she's been acting weird and extra clingy. And thank you again, everybody who sent such really kind messages. It was it's, you know, I know a cat is not a person and it's not a child, but you know, it's nevertheless, I loved him very much and I care very much for my animals, and it's very sad to take care of them as they decline. But let me see, I can show you where he is. I found a really nice spot out my window. I've got rural property here, and I gave Shredder a nice grave that I can see from my writing desk. Let's see if I can show you guys and turn the camera around out my dirty window. Let's see. Will it auto expose? Will it? No, it won't. Sorry, guys. I don't know why the auto exposure is not compensating for the outside, but it's not. At any rate, Shredder's out there right in the corner of the stone wall with a tree where the robins nest and raise their babies. And when my next month is over and my sister and her family will have moved into the upstairs of my house, which I'm very much looking forward to, my sister and I will be finding a litter of kittens, and she's going to take one, and I'm going to get Mina a kitten and keep the cycle going. So, hi, baby. Mwah. Scott, do you know when the show will be ready, publicly available? I know you guys have had a lot of electricity and internet problems.
Yeah, I'm going to assume probably tonight, but, you know, don't bind my feet over that.
No, I I love how you just weave in the low-key chink jokes. Did I ever tell you the story about what I thought foot binding was when I was a kid?
No, what was that?
Okay. This is a story that involves my mother being non-crazy. So it's a novelty, right? My mother told, I think I was probably 8 or 9 years old. And I don't know what we were talking about. What well, I say it was my mother being not crazy. It wasn't a rant, but it was one of her feminist disquisitions. She was always talking about, how hard done by women have always been. And she says, Josh, do you know that they used to bind women's feet in China? That's how bad it was. And I was horrified by this. And I spent the next at least 5 or 6 years believing that what my mother said was that these people had encased Chinese girls' feet in crockery, that they fired clay around their feet. I bound them in China. I thought she meant China plates. So I thought that Chinese girls and women were walking around in dishes. It wasn't.
That way they could.
I mean, it was horrible. It was absolutely horrible. It wasn't crockery. They bound them with like ropes and stuff, but then they deformed their feet into these really creepy things.
Yeah, no, that's somehow worse than what it was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was like, what pattern? Willow?
Oh my God. It's funny.
What if you got you have been doing a lot of painting. Tell us a little bit about what's behind you on the wall.
So I had a comedian friend who he claimed to be jealous of my fucked up childhood. And he was like, oh, as a comedian, that's gold. And I was like, dude, you don't know what you're asking for, man. Like, the fact that anyone could even survive that shit is, nobody survives that intact. And so through those cracks, after you end up piecing your life and your psyche back together, art just kind of drips out. And, this is all just kind of work from the last year or so.
Yeah, the guy that's Art Bell behind you, is it not?
That's Art Bell.
Yep.
Yeah.
Immediately right. Now, Kevin showed me a snap the other day. Did you just do a Joan Crawford?
I did.
Do you have it? Let's see it.
Yeah. It's a small one.
Nice. It's the crazy face that gave it away, Scott.
I know. Well, I can take this down from the auction site and we can raffle this among your audience if they'd like. If you want to do that, we could do that. But
let's talk about that behind the scenes. Let's do something with that.
Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you. Oh, and by the way, audience, those of you watch the Sunday show, and I hope all of you do, you know that I said about a month ago, maybe a little bit longer, that if you sent me actual paper mail in the postal service, that I would send you some sourdough. I know I'm behind, but let me tell you, I have answered all of the mail. I have to get to the mailbox, but all of your cards have been answered. All of you have got a little packet of what I'm calling 4S sourdough starter, and that is Sour Slocum's sourdough starter, because I'm sour and tart. And there's a little explanation in there. So watch your mailboxes. I'm sorry, it does take me a while to get through all the communications, but I sat down and I answered you by hand. I didn't type it. I wrote it with a pen, and you're all going to get your sourdough, and I expect to see loaves of bread from you. So thank you for your patience. And if you would like some of this sourdough starter, it's just I just dry it and powder it up and put it in a little sealed plastic bag, goes in there. All you do is mix it with water and then mix it with fresh flour and water, let it sit, and it's going to bubble up, and you'll have a starter in 1 day rather than waiting 7 days to 2 weeks. But if you would like some sourdough starter, all I ask you, send me a post. No, don't send me a postcard. Send me a card and at least chip in enough money to pay for the postage and the printing of the cards, even if it's just $2. That'll be great. You can give more. Send mail to Disaffected Productions, 89 Main Street, Box 1027, Montpelier, Vermont, 05601, and I will send you some 4S. So, what are you wearing?
Oh, me?
Yeah, I mean that's like the dragonist.
Yeah,
like It's
Yeah,
kind
so
of
there's
sexy.
a segment
Tell
in
us
the
about
show
it.
where I go into split identity of Asian Scott hosting, then white Scott, because if I don't wear
Were
something
you able to
flagrantly,
split yourself into two distinct beings?
well, we were having technical issues with the prompter, and so I was like, okay, well, how can I do this in one take to cut down on editing? So I buttoned the white half, which is just a normal corporate shirt, and so I was trying to do this, but it wasn't quite working.
Well, whatever it is, it sounds like it's going to be funny as hell. So,
Well, that's the thing, because when you do move through this and you grieve and you process, then on the other side, you can't help but be transformed and skewed to be able to laugh at the trauma that you've just gone through. It's like a roller coaster ride. As you're on it, you don't know if you're going to survive, but then, afterwards, you've got this, ability to kind of laugh at what you've just gone through. And so, being kind of voluntold to help out.
voluntold.
Yeah. It's like, okay, we got to fill in. Well, I want to keep everything going smoothly. So, I, just like being raised Asian, didn't really have much of a choice, but we always do. But it was very helpful for me to be forced onto the screen to be able to share what I've been journaling about forever.
Oh, you keep a journal. You've kept a diary.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. When my mom finally died and I was going through, my stuff over at her house, I had like 6 hours to gather anything I could per my sister's terms because she was the executor of the estate. So she said, all right, you've got like 4 or 6 hours, get what you can fit, and, off you go. I had about literally 400 pounds of journals and notebooks from like 20, 30 years. And, I ended up actually just burning them all. Like I kept just a few, but, it was just psychological weight manifested in physical medium. And, I thought,
what do you think about your decision now to have burned some of them? Was it the right decision, or do you regret it?
Because ultimately, I read a lot of my early work, and I was like, the content and the emotion is real, but it's shit, and
Okay.
I don't have enough time to go edit it now when I have, life doesn't stop. Just
Right.
because a chapter is over doesn't mean you have time to go through, categorize, index, clean it all up. I think the best we can do is treat life as a performance in action, is to integrate as you go, to learn how to kind of walk, and you might get shot in the leg, or maybe your mom suffocated your hamster in a kimchi jar, or something that we all experience,
Which your mother did do, right?
oh yeah, for sure.
What a cunt.
Yeah. And so I've been trying to figure out, well, now that I have psychological space, what's the best way I can distill my experiences to help others? And then you start to realize most people don't want to do the work. Maybe they don't even realize they need to do the work. And so I just kind of realized we live in a very fast-paced, fast food culture, fast thought, what's trending. And that's why, the cluster Bs don't get pushback, because everybody is just going along, writing the narrative of life.
Right.
And they don't even realize that we are wasting time. We are moving through life. And to be relevant, to be applicant, to be able to apply what I have experienced and lived through and survived, I thought, well, pictures don't really take that much time to look at, but if it captivates you, you can go in, and I swear that you can start to see some of the depth from which this work came from. I don't think we have enough time in the day. And I think that time is going to continue to get smaller and smaller. And so in the small windows in people's increasingly short attention spans, we've got to fit as much meaning and, in our case as creators, value as possible.
Well, yeah, and I think you're right. I also want to fight against it too. I don't like cooperating with the ever decreasing attention span.
I know.
You know, I don't like the loss of long form reading and writing. It's one of the things I like about live streaming as a format. Like, we do the show on Sundays, and Kevin would like me an awful lot more if I could just keep it to an hour, and I'm trying to do better on my timing. I tend to go long, but that's a structured format. It's edited. It's got a definite beginning and an end. But the live stream format allows for conversations and interviews with more depth and less pressure. So at least, you know, as the generations turn over and people read less and they read shorter, I guess at the very least there are people who are willing to tune in for longer conversations. So that's a good thing.
Yeah, I think the medium is very important, you know, because holy cow, I was like, how am I gonna fit a whole show? And then I was like, oh yeah, I only had, you know, 35 years of fucked up stories I can draw from. And so I start putting down these experiences into short stories and then send them off to go into Kevin's world. And the amount of work it takes to do an hour, I don't even know if I have a full hour. But Josh, you go beyond that. You know, I was going through some of your YouTubes. I mean, hour 40, hour 20.
Yeah, I know.
The amount of work that you put in weekly is commendable. Holy cow.
Well, and what the audience doesn't see is the amount of work that Kevin puts in.
Oh yeah.
You know, because
this
is easy, right? Like this live streaming stuff is easy. You know, I collect material all week. I think about it. I draft it out. I have a writing day where I write the script. So, and I'm writing stuff on Substack, but you know, he comes up with graphical treatments and, you know, introductions to the show and edits and all these things, you know, because, you know, the show is Kevin's creation. I didn't have any intention of doing a show. He was the one who was like, let's do a show. I want to put a microphone in front of you. I didn't even want to be on camera at first. I know that seems ridiculous now because I'm such a ham, but I didn't really want to do it. And I thought in the beginning, I was like, how am I going to fill an hour? What am I going to say? You know, well,
yeah, no, but you
find that it's easier to go longer than it is to, it's just like the writing process. I remember being when I went to college, because I dropped out of high school at the end of my junior year and got a GED, but I had never, you know, and I'd written some papers because back in my day, even in high school, you had to write papers of between, you know, 2 and 4 pages, which sounds horrendous to young people today. But I thought, oh my God, in college, I'm going to have to write like 10 to 15 page papers. I'll never be able to fill the word count. Well, that's not really what happens. If you like writing or if you have any talent at it, your problem is that you go way too long and write way too much. And then you have to go back in and be willing to edit your stuff and prune it down.
Yeah, I used to do video production before the pandemic shut down my business. You know, that's interesting. But
Yeah.
It's very easy to record. It's very easy to push that little red button. But you've quickly realized if you've got an hour of material, the editing to get a good cut from that's where the pain happens.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's painful, but necessary.
Oh yeah, for sure.
We're going to wrap this stream up. But before we do, I'm afraid in a positive way, I'm going to embarrass you, Scott, because Ellen has made a comment that I wholly endorse. She says, Asian Scott is a snack pack. Wow. Well, let me tell you, because I've, of course, met Scott in person. He's hot as hell. You don't even know how hot he is just from looking on the camera here. He's the whole package. Trust me.
No. How can
yeah.
how can love someone as disgusting from where I came from?
Yeah. Well, you're definitely eye candy, whatever's on the inside, my friend.
Well, maybe if my eyes weren't so slanty, I could see it too.
Yeah, maybe if they weren't so squinty, you could see something.
Hello? Anybody there?
Before we wrap up, Scott, do you, I don't, entirely up to you, but do you have any social media presence or work that you want to get out to people?
Well,
And
so I ended up kind of realizing quick, I know you're trying to wrap up, but quick, aside is I did not know that most of my relationships were codependent trauma bond, as the weight of my mom's eternal suffering weighed on me, even from a distance. That made me relevant and able to connect only with other fucked up people. So by the time she died, I started to wake up because I had less pressure, less active pressure on me. And I realized that I was around people who I loved, but we didn't have healthy bonds. So I ended up just like those notebooks, burning all of those bridges, burning my roads, people who I'd known since I was 18 in some cases. And so I deleted all my social media. And that was about 3 or 4 years ago, 2 years ago, I don't know. And so I've been trying to, I don't know, just focus on me. And
understood.
But doing the show, the term traumedian came to me, and I, to my amazement, it was available. So traumedian.com is what I went ahead and purchased. And so
fantastic.
Last night, Kevin was like, where do you want to direct people who might want to follow you? And I said, okay, well, traumedian.com. Guess what? Traumedian is quite available through a lot of the other TikTok, YouTube. I had to do.
Lock it down then. Lock it down.
So I did.
Is brilliant coinage. You guys don't know this, but Scott has come up with a lot of the titles for the show. He's really good at finding these 2-word phrases that just hit the ear right.
Well, it's funny. When you are raised Asian by an insane vampire, werewolf, like monster of a mother, you have to pick things up quickly or suffer her wrath. Even when you do the impossible and you figure it out fast enough, all you do is just not get yelled at actively. You'll still get that Asian mom disappointment. I wasn't taught to tie my shoes, but my friend's mom was driving to pick us up, and she was like, you have to go to karate lesson now, tie your shoes. And I was like, nobody taught me the bunny thing. And she said, figure it out. And so if I can learn to tie a shoe out of guessing, then coming up with titles kind of taps into that need to perform quickly under duress. That never really leaves you.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't. JWink80 just said, I don't think there are comedians that aren't traumatized. And I think that's largely true. I think no, I don't think this. I know it. I've seen it in so many people. I've seen it in myself. I see it in you. I became funny as a no, I'm serious. I mean, I may not be a stand-up comedian, but I am funny. And I became funny as a defensive posture to placate my mother, and then to placate kids at school who reacted to me weirdly or in a bullying way because I was a weird, fucked up, traumatized kid.
Yeah.
So learning to become funny and to become quick on my feet and entertaining made my social fortune. That was the first. That didn't happen until middle school. And it was the first time I had any real friends. When I cracked up an entire classroom, including the teacher, I realized that I had something, and I'd been practicing this at home. I would try to, defend against my mother by amusing her and being clever and being funny and making her laugh. And sometimes it worked and sometimes it didn't. But it does stick with you. And I think that is what gives. I agree. I think most truly funny working comedians come from real extreme horror. I mean, Carrie Fisher was a great example. Before she died, one of her last shows was, I loved what she said. I think it was, what was that show called? Something about drinking. so one of you guys will know it in the comments. One of her last sort of one-woman shows, she did a whiteboard with pictures, basically about how incestuous Hollywood was, because her father, her father was Eddie Fisher, the actor, and her mother was Debbie Reynolds, the actress and Broadway star, who were much more, I mean, they were around and famous long before there was a Carrie Fisher, folks. And she did this grotesque but funny rendering of all of the basically incestuous marriages among all these celebrities, so that basically if you were a kid in Hollywood, you were related to everybody. It was like the European courts of the 1500s. All the royal families in every country were basically the same family. And then she started talking about her daughter, Wishful Drinking. Thank you, Mediocre Witch. That was the name of her show, Wishful Drinking. She told a story about her daughter who'd gone through, I can't remember the details, but something seriously medically traumatic and life-threatening. And also her daughter discovering all of these sort of horrible incestuous connections in the families and making this hilarious joke out of it. And Carrie said to her daughter, the fact that you know how funny that is, that tragedy, is what is going to save you. Right? And I think it's true.
Well, I was not funny growing up. I didn't really know how to express myself, especially not verbally, you know. It wasn't safe to have a voice or a dissenting opinion. So what I did to survive was just perform.
Yes,
Performance will
performativity
save you. And it could be on piano. You'll see a clip on tonight's show of you know what it's like to not really have a voice, but to be able to perform, and being given all the money in the world to get these extracurriculars that's going to make your mom have an Ivy League educated child. You know, the whole goal was to turn me into a performance machine. Yeah. But being funny, I think
it's all under the umbrella of performance. It could be being funny, it could be being a piano player, it could be being a star athlete. I mean, I've seen some of your childhood and young teen years performances, and you're incredible on the piano. Do you still play, or did that become sort of a poison activity for you?
No, you know, I do like music, but I also like to explore new vessels. And I think art is, you know, like actual like media, you know.
Yeah, visual art.
Yeah, this is kind of where I'm at now. Now, you know, because I was so insecure, I also studied a lot of martial arts. I've, you know, been trained to instructor level for, you know, several different styles. And then I was like, well, maybe I can channel that passion into an online, you know, coaching thing. And then I start to realize, no, because people aren't going to be able to perform at the level of engagement where I find joy and satisfaction. I don't want to handhold. And so I've been trying to find, well, what's the next, you know, thing? And I don't really like to try anymore. You know, I'm just so tired of trying to build and create something outside of myself. I mean, most of these things come out, not the large pieces, but most of these come out in anywhere from like 40 minutes to 2 hours.
Okay.
I like things that are fast, where I can dive in, step away, like what I see, and, you know, get a coffee, take a break.
Get a complete result within a day rather than a month.
For sure. And, you know,
we'll answer one. I would answer it for you, but I'll let it's for you. There's a commenter asks, Scott, was your mom a first generation immigrant?
Yeah, she was. Yep.
So, all right. Well, thank you for joining us. Thank you for standing in for me this week and making the show. I really appreciate it. Thanks for both you and Kevin for understanding how out of my mind I was about this. So life is coming back to normal.
Well, we're all sorry for your loss. And, you know, it's nice that Shredder has a nice resting place.
Yep. All right. So folks, I don't know exactly when, but check our usual channels, Rumble, YouTube, and Twitter for the Scott Show. And we will have the regular show coming out this Sunday at 9 p.m. I'll be back, and I'll have something that I hope is entertaining for you. If you like what you get here, we could use your support. This is part of how we try to make our living in a gig economy. There's several ways to do it. If you want to give a one-off donation with no recurring subscription, just go to disaffected.com and click on support us. There's a link there that you can just send us a one-off through PayPal. If you would like to support us every month, you can start as little as $5 or $7. And there's two ways to do it, and you get the same content in both places. And I know I've said this before, but I always remind, I think our Substack is really worth your time, because I do a lot of long form and medium form writing on there too. Some of it makes it on the show, but there's a great deal of content there that doesn't make it on the show. So I think you're getting a good value for your money. And if you want to support our work and my writing, go to disaffectedpod.substack.com and please buy a paid subscription. If you want to start out at the $5 tier, go over to Subscribestar. Go to subscribestar.com/disaffected and sign up there. And thank you all very much. Thank you, Scott. And we'll see you all again on Sunday. If I had a gong sound effect, I'd use it. Bye, everybody.
Well, ching, 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 ching,
Ching, ching, ching.
To you too, Joshua.
Gong. Oh. Now we're ending. Bye.